And then there were two. The Buckeyes and Fighting Irish will face off in the 2025 National Championship game next week from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. My former home, of course. And depending on who you are, you either love it or these two teams you despise and want both of them to lose. Plenty of you out there. Either way, some tremendous teams playing here, playing their best down the stretch as well, and plenty of NFL prospects to get excited about as well. In the NFL, the Commanders keep on marching after knocking off the Buccaneers. The Eagles win a game where the Packers really couldn't get out of their own way. The Ravens, Bills, and Texans all flex their muscles, and the Rams take care of business on the road at home in Arizona versus the Vikings, who chose the worst time of the year to struggle a few weeks in a row now. All of it sets up for a great divisional round of the playoffs next week. Elsewhere in the college football landscape, all-star games are rolling along. The combine is slowly sneaking up. Back to the NFL, free agents are starting to think about new homes and paydays. The coaching and front office cycle continues, and the spring football league gets closer to getting underway. No time like the present, no matter what level of football you like, and we are here for all of it. So sit back and enjoy today. Get your beignets ready to go as we go in depth on the Saints here on Scouting the League. Everyone, and welcome to Scouting the League. Here we are, the middle of January. A few jobs not open that we heard may be open, and one role already filled that no one's really surprised about. Before we jump in on all updates from the head coaching and general manager cycle, as well as focusing on down in the bayou, make sure you go over, like, subscribe, and share this podcast on YouTube or wherever you are listening, whether it is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Megaphone, or on our home over at Fans First Sports Network. That 5-star review goes a long way, but you sharing it goes even further. If it is on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our channel and let us know what you think. Comments are open, and we love to hear the feedback. Well, back off the road for a few days is the man from Inside the League, Neil Stratton. Neil is at Inside the League on X. InsideTheLeague.com is his website, and his blog, SucceedInFootball.com. Neil continued to get closer to that third book release in April. A look at that 2016 NFL draft. Some big-time names from the top of that draft still making their mark on the playoff landscape in the NFL this year. Of course, number one overall, Jared Goff is in a prime spot to take the Lions on their deep run. But you've got Laramie Tunsil, Ronnie Stanley, now eliminated Kenny Clark, all first-rounders. Give us a quick lay of the land, not only on the book, but your status and upcoming travel plans.
Well, I'll tell you, some of the players that featured are still making waves. Who knew Derrick Henry would be such a big
player some really good names in that second round, aren't there?
Remarkable. It's remarkable. Yeah. And, I mean, I think only one of them is not active, which is that's an incredible run for the 8 players that we kind of profile. And most of them are in the playoffs. You alluded to Tunsil. We already talked about Henry. Goff plays this weekend. So, yeah, just an incredible wealth of players that are in there, and can't wait to get it out. The next hurdle is reading it and putting it on Audible. And once again, it's better than that's an audio platform, right? Names made for radio and all that, but a little complicated, but I'll get it figured out. Anyway, that's the next hurdle in front of me. Right now, it's difficult just because of the travel schedule, as you know. You were at one time doing all this stuff too. Next stop will be the Tropical Bowl in Orlando, going back there this weekend, and then following week, the Shrine of the Seniors. So for all those people that are out there, make sure you grab me. Love to say hey. And also have a lot of followers that have been nice enough to say kind words, mostly about Rodrik's work, but sometimes a little bit about mine too. But we really appreciate the feedback. Always provide that, goods and bads. We need them both. We want to try to get this thing we want to try to improve this as much as possible, and really we don't take that kind of stuff personally. We just want to hear what you guys want to hear, and so please let us know.
Yep, absolutely. Again, we love the feedback, and again, Neil, you can go tell Neil hi for me if you don't know Neil. Get to know Neil if you're looking for me. Again, you'll miss out and get the better half of the podcast and Neil. I, of course, am Rodrik David at Right Step ADV on X. My website rsafootball.com. Neil, we'll get to Nick Underhill today. All things New Orleans Saints. Let's take a quick run around the NFL, though, as we get caught up here. I'm just going to put it out. We're not going to talk about it. The Steelers. Anybody out there saying the Steelers need to do something with Mike Tomlin? No, no, stop. Be serious. If you're
If you
calling
think
for Mike Tomlin's job, just stop.
this is not your podcast, this is not your podcast. This is not where you want to be, and I think I would leave it at that. If you think that Mike Tomlin is a poor head coach or the game's passed him by or anything like that, how many winning seasons in a row, Roderick? Is it 11?
I mean, every year that he's been there.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's remarkable.
Just stop. Again, we're going to leave it at that. So again, moving on. The Raiders. Again, we had them let Antonio Pierce go. That's the expected. It was a little bit of a lag, and as they continued to evaluate Tom Telesco, the GM, just one season there, they choose to let him go. It sounds like Tom Brady is involved in the process. Again, maybe for the better, maybe for the worst. But again, have to be some hot names there. An aggressive owner in Mark Davis. What updates are you getting from Las Vegas?
My sense is that John Spytek has the inside track there. It's doesn't hurt that he's a Michigan guy, as is a pretty good quarterback who's also a former quarterback who's a minority owner there. Doesn't hurt that they cross paths in Tampa either. What I've heard is that Tom Brady really is targeting Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. And though we've discussed in the past that Johnson would like to bring Lance Newmark with him, who's the AGM in Washington, we've heard that he'd be open to Spytek as well. And it seems like that's a marriage that may happen and that makes a lot of sense. And so that's kind of, I think, where we're going in Las Vegas right now. I think it also helps that Spytek has a pretty rich history with a lot of the people that had success in New England. And obviously when Dave Ziegler was there for a very brief time, he brought a lot of those people in to Las Vegas. So it just seems like all the parts are there. It just seems like it would make a lot of sense. We'll see if that does happen in the near future.
Yeah. Again, Vegas seems to be moving, methodically and correctly in the right direction. That may be a change up for Raiders fans out there, but again, maybe the right voice in number 12 in Mark Davis's ear. Again, Richard Seymour. They've got some good football people in that building. So again, moving in the right direction. So the other one, again, another one, the Patriots. To no one's surprise, hire Mike Vrabel as the next head coach. There was that faction that really wanted Ben Johnson. You think about the Ben Johnson effect. Everybody wanted Ben. I think most fan bases would say, hey, that he was our number one guy. Again, you think about the development of Drake May. But the Patriot way will be back in full effect with a different voice. But again, Mike Vrabel was a major, major part of those that Belichick and Patriots dynasty. I did have the privilege of working with Coach Vrabel during the spring of 2013 at Ohio State. Cannot say how highly I think of both the man and the coach. Excited to see him get another chance in New England. There's also been plenty of people that were maybe disappointed or wondering if the Patriots were going to get popped by the Rooney Rule adherence. At this point, it appears all is settled. It also sounds like Ryan Cowden, former Giant exec, is going to be headed there to work under Elliott Wolf. Cowden was with Braves in Tennessee, so I'm sure he's going to be instrumental in kind of marrying what Vrabel wants with that personnel department, what they need to find. Landscape kind of getting settled in New England. Any other updates from there?
They got an all-star front office now. I mean, I think we've made no secret of our high regard for Elliott and Alonso there. Bringing in Cowden, I've heard really good things about what he did in Nashville when they were winning there and what a role he played. The question is, can they kind of find that symbiosis where they're all working together? It's a little surprising. I guess it's not surprising. I mean, when you get Vrabel, then you take whoever he wants to bring in. And from what I've heard so far, things are smooth, but we'll have to see what happens. And I'd love to see. I've heard that the Jets are going to make a move at least by the 20th in naming a GM. that gives them 6 days to interview Elliott Wolf if they were so inclined. I mean, if I'm looking at the Giants, if I'm someone who's involved in that, I got to take a look at him, at least reach out to him, see if he's looking to go somewhere where his authority is unchallenged. But again, I'm not trying to make something where there is nothing. So far, so good on that front, and I think they can work together. They're all very capable football people, and hopefully, there's a way that they can make the team take the team in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's seems to be settled, but again, as we know in the NFL, it moves fast, and decisions will now be made with Vrabel in the building, and if decisions haven't already been made, and stuff getting lined up. Again, it'd be one of those. If you're the Jets, do some due diligence, bring in Elliott, do an interview, even if there's nothing more than a fact-finding mission. Which again, sometimes that's what interviews can be. So it'll be interesting to see where it all goes there. Well, let's head down south. Again, we kind of ended last week with the question on the Cowboys. Indications were that they were working on an extension with Mike McCarthy. They didn't materialize, and they chose to go a different direction. This is, of course, after they had blocked the Bears from interviewing him. Again, a power struggle, a question on final authority. That would probably be an indication that, again, they just weren't on the same page about where to go in the future. A lot of people criticizing Jerry Jones. Again, you missed out on your playoff window to interview guys like Aaron Glenn, Ben Johnson. But again, you're going to have some time. You've got an attractive place with a lot of questions. Oh, also Coach Prime. Let's go ahead and throw his name in there and what that could mean for the whole thing. You're also going to get names like Kellen Moore, who's been connected there. It's going to be an interesting one in Dallas as they work through this process now, and probably have to wait and be patient to find their next head coach until these playoffs get completed.
Given the fact that the window's closed, they waited so long. Maybe they've got to dip into the college ranks. I mean, we're already hearing Dion. There are probably a lot of other prominent head coaches, I think, in the college ranks who would be willing to coach America's team. I remember there was a time I can recall when Jerry Jones went out and got a coach that had a lot of success that came straight from the college ranks. Didn't wind up being a long-term marriage, but hey, they had a lot of success over a short period of time. Maybe he's ready to do it again. I don't know. I don't have anything there. It's certainly titillating to think of Deion Sanders as the head coach there, but my gosh, could they fit both of those guys in one team? That's an awful lot of dynamism, I guess I'd say. I don't want to use the word ego, but wow, that's two pretty strong personalities. I don't know. We'll see. That'll be fun to watch.
Yeah. Again, for football fans out there, patience is always a virtue. Pump the brakes. We talk about that all the time on here. Relax. Again, a decision doesn't have to be made today or this week. Again, as the process goes on, check all your boxes. Again, it's the old sales tactic. Put pressure on it. If you feel that there's pressure on, you're going to make maybe not the best decision. You got to remember that as a fan. We want something done now. Pump the brakes. Let them go through their process. I would be under the I would make the argument that jumping the gun and just making a decision because you want to be first is usually not going to be correct. You're going to have plenty of time to do things. The Patriots knew who they wanted, got their guy, got it done. If you're going through the process and want to find out who the right guy may be, again, be patient, have some time. And that goes for all these other teams. We've got the Jets, the Raiders, the Titans all have GM openings, while the Saints, Jets, Raiders, Bears, Jaguars, Cowboys all have head coaching openings. We're going to get these different names. We've got guys like Ian Cunningham, John Eric Sullivan, who's been named. We've got the Speedtex. We've got the Matt Russells. We've got a bunch of names out there that are going to be a part of the conversation. Is there anybody I'm missing that we're going to see their names pop up for one or multiple of these teams again in the next coming week?
I mean, I think you've hit most of the big names. There are a few that I think probably should be in there but aren't yet. Really interested to see what direction the Titans take. From what I've heard, they're looking to institute the Packer way there. And so I think John Eric has got a good shot there, especially if he's willing to kind of, I don't know if I want to say a secondary role to Chad Brinker, but it seems like that's the way they're building it out over there. But maybe, kind of being hand in hand and really installing that culture and that way of doing things is appealing to him. John Eric certainly is a guy who's going to be a GM at some point. I guess he just has to answer the question to himself if this is the situation that he wants. But talented guy, very engaging, and I think has the potential to be very successful there in Nashville.
Yeah, that Green Bay way, again, we'll see if they can get it copied and see if anybody else wants to jump on that train.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of those GM openings that some wanted to come open was those New Orleans Saints. GM, Executive Vice President Mickey Loomis, he's held that GM title since 2002, over 20 years. He got that bump to EVP and GM in 2013. In New Orleans, there's been a lot of good times. Those good times mostly involved Sean Payton, but it certainly affected the way they handled the cap, handled the roster. So all things Saints, let's turn to New Orleans. Nick Underhill, who covers the Saints for New Orleans, Football, has lived, more recently died with the Saints. He joins us to talk about New Orleans, where they go with this head coaching search, and should there be another search underway right now as well. Nick, welcome to Scouting the League.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Completely unsolicited endorsement here. If you're serious about the Saints, then you're New Orleans football subscriber. It's just gotten bigger and better ever since he started it. What is this, year 3, 4?
We're going into year 5. Year 5 started it right after COVID. Yeah, so we're going into year 5 here. Yeah, 5 long years.
I've been reading Nick's stuff since he was back in Baton Rouge. He took that 1 year off. We all have we all make our mistakes every once in a while, but
sure.
Now he's back, and it's really exciting to watch and to read and watch and listen and all the kind of things that Nick, as far as content that Nick's providing out there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we like to start off with the origin story, Nick. We try to be encouraging to people who want to get in the industry. More often than not, they're scouts and executives when we're talking to them, but every once in a while we have media members. Tell us about how you wound up where you are now.
Yeah, so I was living in Pennsylvania, and I had the opportunity to freelance some Red Sox stuff for a newspaper from Massachusetts when the Red Sox were in the area, and I would drive to Cleveland and do a game from there. It was about 2 hours away. Do some little stuff there, just get some clips, build them up, and kind of get my profile going a little bit. And 1 year I saw that they were looking for somebody to cover spring training for 2 weeks and give their main beat writer like a little spell down there. And I called them up and I lied to them and I was like, hey, like I'm going to be down here for another assignment. Like I would love to do it. And I can swing both things. And they're like, sure, if you're going to be down there anyhow. Because they weren't going to pay for travel. They weren't going to pay for lodging. And, I did not grow up with money or means. And I was dating my now wife at the time. We had been together for about a year, and we maxed out the credit cards and just kind of went all in on this thing, flew myself down there, stayed in the nastiest hotel you could ever imagine for 2 weeks and covered the Red Sox. And at the time of my life, I was dumb enough to believe that might lead to something else. And knowing what I know now, like, I know that's the dumbest bet in the world, but I was a total idiot and I thought it would work. So I go back up to Pennsylvania and, a few months later, football season starts and they asked me, hey, do you want to blog about the Patriots and we'll pay you? It was a penny a page view. And I'm like, sure. Thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Making no money again, like $400 a month. But I knew I had an association with the newspaper and I knew that meant that I could probably get credentials to cover the Patriots. So I email Stacey James, type up this whole thing and he approves it. And I start driving 8 hours one way from Pennsylvania to Foxborough to cover a game, and again, losing money every single time. They're paying me $75 to do this, 16 hours in the car, got to stay in a hotel, got to cover the game, got to eat. Like it's a losing endeavor every single time. But, I did that for probably 2 months. And I just asked them, like, hey, if I can move out here and make it work, what could the pay structure be? And would you guys be interested in it? They said, yeah. And we kind of like figured it out. And we had to add in Boston Bruins and, Red Sox and Celtics and Patriots. And, add it all together, was making like $35,000 a year, had to live in another state, driving to Massachusetts to cover stuff. But got me started, and we kind of got going that way. I knew nothing about hockey. Thank God during the games they would have like the closed caption up on the TV, because like I'm just reading that stuff and like writing notes. Oh, he took a shot from the point. Like I don't know what the hell the point is. But we made it work and we put it together. And over time, did that, build up my name a little bit, got hired onto the staff, started making 50,000 instead of 35,000 or whatever it was. Went from ramen noodles to noodles in a cup, but it worked, and that was kind of the grind. And started breaking some stories and doing some things and get my name out there a little bit. And thankfully, year one of doing it, I shared the beat with a guy named Ian Rappaport, and follow each other on Twitter. He sees kind of the stuff I'm doing, and the Advocate down here, they're hiring for a Saints writer at the time, and Ian knew somebody on staff, and they asked Ian, who they should hire, and he recommended me, and I got the job, came down here, and started covering the Saints, and here we are now.
That's an excellent story. Again, kind of speaks to the sporting industry. I'm going to do something that I love for almost free sometimes. Sometimes you're losing money. But again, the connections you make, again, obviously everybody in the football world knows who Ian is. And again, you just work and bite and grind. And again, when opportunity meets preparation, good things happen. And sometimes it doesn't. But again, it's all worked out for you. And now, covering the Saints, you've been there now for, we said 5 years on your website now, correct? So you've seen more lean years recently for the Saints, but again, a team for the last Mickey Loomis era that is consistently competitive, but you could say has been kicking down the can down the road for a long time. Has it finally caught up to them? Should we be talking, before we get to the head coaching search, should we be talking about a different job as well down in New Orleans?
Well, I mean, I think the fans would say, yeah. And just add it all together, just for background. I've been here since 14. I worked for the newspaper for a while. Now I run my own website. So saw some good years, and now definitely on the backside of that. And, seeing some of the good years and some of the good things they did, I mean, it isn't all bad. This was a very competently run franchise, I think, for a while. And, I think the thing that Mickey Loomis doesn't get any credit for, it's like during the good times, it was every good personnel decision was credited to Sean Payton. Every good draft pick was credited to Jeff Ireland. Every, at the time, viewed as good cap moves or cap creativity was credited to Kai Harley. And nobody, any other team was like the GM, like Mickey never got any credit for any of that stuff. So I do think that he did some things well, but everything since Sean left has kind of went sideways. The Dennis Allen hire obviously didn't work. And I think the thing that really kills him with the perception is that he has not been willing to admit that was a failure, that it didn't work, that there's things to learn from it. And he just spoke yesterday after the season. And I think there's a lot of valid criticism right now for him just not going up there and saying, we weren't good enough. This has to be better. It's unacceptable. He's a good coach. Just because we didn't get the wins, it doesn't mean what we did isn't working. And, I think all that stuff kind of creates a little bit of a hot seat for him. I'm not there where I'm throwing it all out. I think he's done enough good over the 20, 25 years that I can sit and watch and say, all right, he gets a chance to get this right. Like, it made sense trying to continue it. Didn't work. You're on the other side of it. But I don't think you get to make another decision after this one if you get it wrong. Like, this is the do or die moment for him. And also he's 68. So it probably is like the last major decision he gets to make. Like, we let our U.S. presidents make huge decisions at the age of 80. We don't let general managers do that. Like, this is probably his last act as it. And right or wrong, I don't think, definitely if you're wrong, you don't get to go back into the well in 2 years and try to do it again. Like, he has to get this right, but it's a legacy move for him too. I think how he kind of sets him up in the post Mickey era is going to be how we remember him. And if he doesn't get it right, it's going to be kind of an unfavorable view. And it's probably a lot of people are going to say, hey, this is a guy that got one major decision right with Sean Payton and it set him up, but then he couldn't figure it out after. Fair or not, that's how we're going to talk about him. So I think it's important just for, his legacy and all that he does get this right and puts them on a path to better days than what they're in right now.
Nick, okay, so I don't know how many years of ownership the Tom/Gale era represent. It's been a long time. It's been mostly far more positive, certainly than the Meekum ownership and what have you. But we've got a head coach that was there for a long time. Then someone off his staff took over for him. We had during the glory days, especially, we had one head coach, one quarterback the whole time, and rightly so. And then, I don't know how long Dennis Lofshe's been there. He's been there for a long time. Is this team too comfortable? Is it set in its ways? Is it past being able to adapt? And have we seen that, especially over the last couple years? Or do you think that, hey, generally speaking, if you look at the last 25 years, it's been a very positive run. Let's just keep doing what we've been doing.
Yeah, I think it is. I think that there's definitely a lot of comfort. And I think one of the things that's a little bit rough is that it doesn't necessarily run the way that you think a lot of other teams do. And I think if you're a head coach coming into this, like, that's probably a little bit of a positive, that there is this like extreme patience and all that stuff. But when you're kind of looking at it, it doesn't feel like maybe people are playing by the same rules as other places. And just the idea, like, for instance, again, I'm not ready to fire Mickey, but the idea of his seat being high almost seems preposterous to like someone like me watching. It's like, how would he ever get fired? Like, he's never going to get fired. But if he was a GM of any of the other 31 teams, like that's a huge talking point across the league. But everybody kind of looks at it and they're like, well, he's never going to get fired. He's listed as a executor in the will. Like, it's just not gonna happen. And I think it just makes it very hard and weird to kind of analyze everything. I thought it was very good though that Gail Benson came down from her seat and made the decision to fire Dennis Allen. That wasn't Mickey's decision. Like, he didn't want to do it. He actually tried to stand in the way of it. And just at least knowing that the owner will operate like every other owner and make one of them decisions, like, that was good to know. We didn't necessarily know that. And until you see it, it's kind of hard to know, hey, like, is there ever a point where enough is enough? Or is this person who, took over for Tom? And I don't want to get too messy here, but if you guys remember, like, the whole succession plan and the will changing from, the daughter to Mrs. Benson, like, there was a lot of stuff that played out. So you don't know, who's owed what, or how things kind of lay out, or what role everyone played, or what role she's playing in it. Is she just hands off, or is she hands on? Like, you have no idea. So that move kind of said, all right, like, there is somebody that will do more than just, like, she'll spend all the money in the world. I think that makes her a great owner. But the other piece of that is, will you make a hard decision? We know now that she will. So that was actually a good thing. But yeah, the comfort element of it, that's probably the thing that bothers me the most. And, I think a lot of the candidates right now for this head coaching role, the best ones probably do kind of have some ties to them that are realistic. Like, Aaron Glenn has realistic ties. I'm not a fan of Mike McCarthy as the hire, but, he's probably okay given the grouping. If Aaron Glenn disappears, like, he becomes a viable option. He's been here before. If you want to make the home run swing, Joe Brady was here before. So there is going to be something familiar. But yeah, I just kind of, if you could let me create the perfect candidate, is somebody that's just never had their food on this plate and can come in with a fresh point of view and maybe shake things up a little bit. And I think it's an extremely fair criticism, because they did lean into comfort last time, and comfort, it did not work.
Okay, so I admire the fact that you often give pushback to people, in my estimation, are lazy, saying, oh, well, look at the Saints cap situation. Well, I think there were good reasons for why they continue to kick the can down the road for a long time, okay? But now we've got the oldest team in the league, and we've clearly got players who are in the back half of their careers, maybe the fourth quarter of their careers, especially on defense. Is it time to really, pay the piper, no pun intended, on when it comes to the cap, and really clean it up and stop operating the way we've been operating the way the Saints have been operating for the last 10, 15 years or what have you?
Yeah. Oh, I think undoubtedly, yes. Like, and the thing with their cap, the pushback that I always give is that, like, people are like, well, they're going to have to cut they're going to cut Marshawn Lattimore, and they're going to cut Alvin Kamara. They can't pay all these people. And it's like, you can always make the math work in some way. It's just always, the question is it worth it? And I thought, even like last year, what was kind of the line in the sand for me is like, this is dumb. Like they cannot keep doing this. It doesn't make sense anymore. You can't keep, taking high interest loans out essentially to keep together a team that's kind of not going anywhere. And yeah, I think it's undoubtedly time to figure it out. My biggest issue with their build of this team, it's that it just makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. 2 years ago, they go out and they sign Derek Carr, and then they just stop. That's the only move you make. And Derek Carr is not the guy you bring in to elevate, your A.T. Perry. He's not going to make 6th-round pick A.T. Perry a better receiver. You need receivers to make Derek Carr a better quarterback. You need to treat him like he's Sam Darnold. And even Sam Darnold, when push comes to shove, isn't going to be able to get it done. But they built this team. It was like, we got Derek Carr, and now we're going to start this like weird little soft rebuild. And now you have this huge Derek Carr contract on your books. It's $51 million against the cap. If you cut him, I believe it's 50 right now. The dead money hit.
Basically no savings.
Makes no sense. And you can't afford to build around him because you keep restructuring everyone. So you can restructure everyone. And now you're tying money into, 75-year-old Cam Jordan when he hits that age. Like, it just doesn't make sense anymore. I think it's time to take the medicine. If it was me running the team, I'm cutting Derek. I'm just going to be terrible for a year, and I might have the assets to go get a quarterback next year. It's impossible to know if you're going to draft the right one or not. But I would rather that path than pay him and then like do this little soft rebuild around him. I think it's time just to cut it down. But I don't think there's any chance they do that. I think they're going to try to hold on and try to keep going with it. And if I had to like handicap it, I think that's probably why like Mike McCarthy ends up being the head coach, because I bet he's aligned with that thinking. If Chicago doesn't hire him, I think he's going to end up here. And that's the thing I want to see the least with this. Like, I'm just ready for him to do something else. Like, I don't think the team's terrible. They're in a really bad division. Like, there's a reality where you could do enough to win it next year, but like I don't think that's a noble goal anymore. Like, aiming for 10 wins just doesn't feel, it's just not worth. Like, being Tampa Bay, and you got to pay Derek Carr $90 million over the next 2 years of cash. Like, it's not worth it to me.
Yeah, it's
the
cap
unpacked
situation.
A lot, Nick. I don't mean to cut you off, Rodrik. You got a lot there that you talked about. I got to tell you, my kids, my boys' favorite player all time, probably favorite saying is Cam Jordan. Nick, if you're the GM, if you're Mickey, what do you do with Cam Jordan? Where is he next year?
I like Cam, go off to Detroit and get a ring, and it's time. Like, hey, look, you were great here, great culture guy, all that stuff. Like, and you could sell me on the idea of like keeping him around to help the next coach establish his culture, but I don't want to pay the money. It's just time. Like, and I think there's still a little bit of juice in there. I think he showed that end of the year. They got Brian Young in there as the defensive line coach the last 5-6 weeks after Rizzi took over. Saw some uptick in the sack production. They got him out of the defensive tackle role, got him back on the edge more, and he looked okay. I think there's something there for him to help a team that's just looking to go get that ring. But I allow him to go do that, and I set him free to find that path. I just think it's time. I think it's time to move on from some of these guys, and I don't think they're going to cut Derek and take that huge hit. But I think you have to start trimming down some of these and just take your medicine and win 5 games on purpose next year. Like, you just did it on accident. Like, it's okay to do it on purpose. Trim it down and be in a better position to kind of have some assets to build towards something going forward.
Would you try to push Cam? I know Cam still thinks he's got something in the tank. I recognize that. Maybe he does. Maybe he should be allowed to go the Ricky Jackson route. But would you offer Cam kind of the Zach Strief route where maybe you put him in the booth for a year, maybe make him an assistant coach for a year, try to keep him in the organization? Or do you just kind of say, listen, Cam, go do your thing, and then maybe you come back for a one-day deal when it's all said and done and you retire as a Saint?
I would do the one-day deal. The realistic outcome here, probably the most realistic outcome here is I bet they try to offer him like a massive pay cut. I think he has like a $12 million base next year. And then again, you go back to that dead money hit, it's like 23. And just the way they operate, my guess is they try to get him to take a pay cut and come back. But I'm just trimming some of it and taking the hit if I'm running that seat. And that's where I think I'm like, it's just the philosophical difference starts to come into play, because like I just no longer believe that this is worth it. And I think you just do it fast, like in a couple spots, and just don't have negative 50 next year when the season starts. Like, take some of that now and be ready to start over.
The cap situation really plays into, I think, what's going to affect the head coaching search too. Because again, like your point on McCarthy, if McCarthy's going to be the guy, I think you're keeping Derek Carr. And again, I would argue you've got $50 million basically dead money with Carr, so why not keep him around with the way the quarterback landscape is going to be, especially thinking about, all right, maybe one of those guys in the 26th draft may be the better option anyway, again, if you're going to be a 4 or 5 win team. But again, does Mike McCarthy want to sign up for his next job knowing that it's going to be maybe 2 and done? Again, it probably hurts you in the Ben Johnson sweepstakes, which again, everybody would love. Aaron Glenn is going to see the landscape enough where, again, why would I leave here when I could leave in 2 years and come into a better situation? And you don't want to talk about lame duck coaches stepping into a situation. Again, is this one of those situations where you truly do hire somebody, that rare third time retread, knowing that, hey, this is my last payday, this is my last chance, maybe I make magic in a bottle and I come in and do something with a depleted old roster that is not trying to win now?
Yeah, I mean, that's the big issue here. Is I think I talked to somebody connected to one of the candidates, and his thing, they were asking like, hey, do you actually think they'll get 2 years to rebuild this? Like, do you think there'll actually be time to do it? And would they be aligned with the rebuild? And the answer was, if they're willing to go that path, yeah, I think you do actually get the patience to go and do that. And I do think that they want to believe that they'll be aligned with whatever the coach wants to do. But you hire somebody that is looking at a different path than the one you're looking at. Like, I do believe Mickey Loomis when he says, we will let the coach make the decision on the quarterback and all this, but you're probably hiring the coach that has the same viewpoint as you. So yes, you will let him make that decision, but he's going to probably make the same decision you want to make. But I do think all those things make it a somewhat unattractive job for sure. They aren't going to have Ben Johnson's not even coming here to talk. So like, we know where he stands on this position. I don't think Vrabel was super interested in it. I think he would have took the conversation if his thing played out long enough, just because he's going to play the game and keep his name out there and create a market for himself. But I don't think he was interested in the job. I do think Aaron Glenn is. I know McCarthy is. So if it's one of those two, I think you end up in an okay place. But you're right. Like, AG might go back, evaluate everything and say, am I going to go to New York without a quarterback? Am I going to go to New Orleans without the long-term quarterback? And the answer might be no. And you're right. He might decide to come back out in a year. Like, the opportunities aren't going anywhere for him, especially, that program they're down 13 starters on defense, or 13 players on defense, right? Like, they'll probably be even better on that side of the ball next year when they have all their players. So his market's still going to be there. But you're right. It's a tough job. It's a tough job. You have a bad cap situation. You have a quarterback who's probably, you got him for a year, and then after that, you probably need to move on. It's a full scale rebuild. And even if you have some success right away, your roster's old as hell. Like, again, Derek's your quarterback, so you might compete in the NFC South next season if you stay healthy. But then where are you at a year from now when Cam Jordan's another year older, Demario Davis is another year older, Tyrann Mathieu another year older, Alvin Kamara somehow still looks great, but at some point he's going to be a 30-year-old running back, and he's going to look like a 30-year-old running back, and that's probably within the next year or two. So it's just they've drafted one Pro Bowler since 17. Like, it's just not a good, and that guy's missed 19 games over the last 4 years. It's just not a great situation with a ton of upside right now.
Everything that you have just described tells me that there's really only one choice. And I know this is going to sound crazy because it's the one head coaching candidate you haven't mentioned, and you probably know more than I do on this. But you're looking at a bridge situation here. I don't know how anyone comes in and wins And I don't think Mike McCarthy is going to want to do that. I know that Ben Johnson's not going to want to do it. I can't believe Aaron Glenn's even considering it. Does Darren Rizzi still have a chance to be the head coach here? I mean, given all these circumstances and the fact that he's probably maybe never be a hot head coaching candidate, given the way that the Saints half season lasted with him, the fact that he's a special teams guy, all those kind of things. Does he make sense, or is he not even being under consideration right now?
I've made the argument myself. Like I think if you can't get someone you love, like there's worse outcomes. I think than just kind of you put him in the role. You see the players love him, like they absolutely love him. You put him in the role, and maybe he succeeds, and you have a good season, and you just found the head coach. But if he doesn't, you just ate a year of cap. You don't spend any money at all on your roster, and you go into it next year with more cap space and a better draft pick, and maybe that attracts the candidate you want, and you just ate a year of the rebuild, and you don't erode your culture at all by hiring the wrong guy because you just hired the guy that they wanted. So even if you suck, like they're fighting for him, and the odds of it just like going to hell are probably a little bit, lower with a guy that all the players are behind. So I do think he is a serious candidate. I do think, though, that they're going to be able to get one of the people that they want. Like, I would be surprised if they completely strike out here, but I think the Rizzi option's on the table. And I've heard worse ideas. Like, that was kind of like my initial thought on it was like, just keep him in it and just wait a year and then hit the market when you are maybe one of the top 3 more desirable places and it isn't feeling like you're picking from scraps. But yeah, let's say Chicago hires McCarthy, AG goes to New York. At that point, it's kind of, are you swinging for the fences with Joe Brady, or do you just do the safe thing, keep Rizzi in place, and go back at it a year from now? There's an argument for the Rizzi thing. Like it's like, look at the Raiders. Like, it's okay. Like you can end up in a better situation, and they're talking about Ben Johnson going there. I don't know if we believe that or not. I haven't like been following their situation very closely, but you could end up in a much better situation a year from now.
Yeah.
You go back to the Saints and what they were with Sean Payton for such a long time. You don't want to be, we've talked about it with other organizations, Vrabel in New England. You don't want to be the guy that follows the guy. You want to be the guy that follows that guy. Again, Dennis Allen being what he was, now you're dealing with the same thing kind of with the quarterback situation. Only Green Bay is allowed to just, keep putting in perennial, Hall of Famers, and, whether Jordan Love lives up to that or not. If you're talking about the quarterback, again, you could be looking at a couple of years with the quarterback too, where things could look bad and ugly. Going back to Mickey Loomis, does the owner, we talked about Gail Benson making the tough decision. If Mickey Loomis goes to Gail Benson and says, hey, this is the plan, we're going to pull the interim tag off, we're going to limp through the next year, and then we're going to go get our guy, with the hot seat that Mickey Loomis is under, can an owner get on board with that in today's social media and media landscape, knowing that even before you play a game, the arrows are going to be flying?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I would say, I think they could. I think they really could. I don't think they care. I don't think, like, Neil, man, like, do they care what people think? Like, I've never seen it. Like, I would argue my biggest criticism of them right now is that it almost feels like they don't care at all what their fans think about anything. Like, I think that's kind of the yeah, I think they could. She'd have to, I think she could get on board with it. It is tough though, because like this is an owner that is kind of like new to criticism. Like, she was kind of the savior of everything for a while, and just kind of everybody loved her. She's from the community. I think last year was probably the first time that she felt real criticism and her name started getting dragged into it, and then you saw that action right away. So the question would be, could she sign off on it and then actually live through it in reality and be okay with it in week 5 when they went 0-4 and now they're losing in front of a booing crowd in their own building? would she be able to stay with that? That's kind of the question, and I don't know the answer to that. But I think they could. I think they could sell that, and it would be an ugly atmosphere though. This fan base, I think, would really turn. Like they've already turned. I've never seen it like it is right now, and I think it would be really ugly. But yeah, that would be a fascinating situation to see kind of play out. Because I don't know what her resolve is when she's out in the community and people are screaming "F you" at her and all this stuff. Like that would probably start happening, and I don't think she's ever experienced anything like that. There's an old story about Tom Benson, like kind of standing. I can't remember what coach it was, standing behind one of the coaches, and he went to an LSU game, and like people started throwing like cokes at him and swearing at him, and he went and fired the coach. Like that's I think if Gail was in that situation, I could see her reacting to it maybe a little bit early. But look, if they hire the wrong person and they're losing all kinds of games, and it's still the same outcome. And honestly, I don't know if it turns around quick enough here. It's tough to even imagine the next coach lasting the 3 years because I just don't know if they can get the roster in the shape it needs to be.
The other thing that's going to happen, you've got Mickey Loomis. We talked about his age. He's been there forever. He's a saint. And that's, again, we talked about the comfort level of that front office. But even within that comfort, you've got some highly respected names. Jeff Ireland, who, again, both Neil and I think highly of. Kai Harley, well-respected around the league. I'm sure Mickey wants to keep this in place as much as he can. A lot of good people there. A lot of good scouts there. A lot of good personnel people there. You think best case scenario, he just, again, you take the GM title off, he moves into an executive role, non-football, he oversees it, he's around, somebody else elevates into that GM role. Again, if things go south in a hurry, it's not a transition plan within the current Saints organizations. It is blow it all up and completely start from scratch. Does that play into Mickey Loomis's thinking and to Gail Benson's thinking? Not only on this head coaching decision, but again, the way we're going to treat everything. Again, as the arrows start flying, it's not just, hey, we've got to find a new head coach. It's let's burn it all down and start completely from scratch, which means all these life Saints are now finding new jobs.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the big part of the equation, and I'm sure that's that. I mean, Mickey knows what he needs. Like he needs to save all his guys right now. Like that's probably foremost on his mind and trying to figure this out. And I have heard that their process is a little bit different this time with kind of how they're looking at the coach. And I think there's more voices in that room. Dave Ziegler's in there, Randy Mueller's in there, Michael Parrington as a real big voice in the organization. And I do think that people probably misunderstand how that front office runs a little bit too. Like I think some of these guys have more power than people would be expecting them to have, and maybe some of the voices that are loudest in that room are the ones that don't get talked about a whole lot. So, and I think even over the last few years, there's probably been a little bit of a change in who's got the biggest voice and kind of how things come together. But I really do think this process right now is like Randy, Dave, Jeff, Kai, Parrington, and Loomis, like all six of them just kind of working at it together instead of like one singular voice. And I think maybe last time it was a little bit more Mickey driven and everybody else was in there. And I think they're really listening to each other this time. But yeah, if Mickey goes down, it's the whole ship. Like it has to be all of them. Otherwise, like you're just shifting chairs a little bit. And we already seen how that worked. I don't think it would play out that way. And there are a lot of really good scouts up there. There's a lot of really good football minds. And, going back to the beginning of like, would you fire Mickey? I think it's all the people around him is one of the reasons I say no too. Cause like, I do kind of believe that there's enough brain power there for them to figure this thing out. And, I have trouble believing that when you have, 3-4 former GMs up in the room and some other really good scouts that you can't find the answers to some of these questions. So, we'll kind of see how it plays out. But yeah, if it goes down and they get this wrong, like it's clean slate top to bottom, and that would be weird for the Saints because like they just don't do anything that's unfamiliar. But then you're looking outside the building to how other people do things. How is there someone in Houston? Is there someone in Detroit? Like I think then other names kind of start bubbling up. And I was kind of interested to see if Mickey would move up this year and hire one of these duos and be open to it, but it doesn't sound like that's an option at all. It's going to be the coach working with this front office. So yeah, leads you back to that familiar name. So like it's going to be someone that they know and they're comfortable with, and that whittles it down to McCarthy, AG, and I think Joe Brady.
Let's take it back to the field. One of the most controversial first rounders that the team has drafted of late is Trevor Penning. Nick, should he, on first opening week of next season, let's say you're GM, is he your starting right tackle? Is he your starting left guard? Is he on the bench, or is he on another roster?
I like that you could say one of the most controversial. Like it is debatable.
Maybe, yeah, it is. That's not debatable.
Yeah, I mean, since 18, there's a few candidates there. One of the most controversial for sure. I guess it depends on who's there at 9. Is Will Campbell there, and do you not have other options at that position? I think you can definitely justify a pick there, and I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world to take Will Campbell and then move Fuaga back to the right side. But I think Will Campbell has short arms. Like, I don't know. Like, do you want 2 guys with short arms?
We see him as a guard. I mean, everyone that we brought on here pretty much is calling Will Campbell a guard. Now,
yeah,
I mean, the Saints have spent a lot of picks on guards and centers and that kind of thing over the years. Do you want to keep making that investment? I don't know, especially if you don't get it right. Boy, that would really blow up in their faces.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're asking your opinion, not mine.
Then you have multiple guys playing out of position. Yeah,
exactly.
I'm gonna say he's your starter. He was okay this year. I think he it got to a weird point where I think he was getting overhyped, like especially by PFF. Like they were giving him crazy grades in the middle of the season. I was like, I don't know if I see that. Really good run blocker though. I mean, very key there. But he was serviceable. Like you could play him, and I think the fact that there was a large scale emergency around him at like basically every other position helped camouflage any minor emergencies he was having at that spot. But I think he was okay. But I do think that you got to nail your coaching hires here and make sure that they have a plan to hide him, because boy, I'll tell you what, man, like you'll be there this year probably, like if they practice back at Metairie, like when you aren't scheming up for him and you're just doing one-on-one drills, it is scary to watch because he just gets beat by everything, and you just got to make sure that you got a plan for how to play him. And this coaching staff, I think, did an excellent job of making him a serviceable player. But if you leave him kind of, to rest on his own laurels and succeed on his own accord, I don't think it's going to look very good. So, but I think you can play him with the right plan.
I think one of the biggest stories that y'all broke this year, maybe the biggest in my estimation, and certainly the most underplayed in Saints Nation, is Tyrann Mathieu' comments about how they practiced with the Chiefs and the tempo and the number of plays and the physicality, quite frankly. Do the Saints practice hard enough?
I heard from some people that vehemently disagreed with what was said there. I would say definitely, like, look, we only get to see like 15, 20 minutes of practice and they kick us out of there. So I can't speak from my own eyes on what they're actually doing on a day-to-day from September until the end of the season. This last camp was actually like competitive and hard, and it looked like they were actually practicing in this camp. But I would say the first 2 camps that Dennis Allen ran, it was borderline shocking how light those days felt. And it's kind of like you're looking around like, what's going on here? The first year, you get to change and it's like, oh, like super intense Sean, the DA, like you don't necessarily, like the red flags don't necessarily go off. And then the next year it's like, man, like this is bad and they suck. Like what are they doing out at these practices? Their Friday practices feel shockingly short. Like it's like you get out there, we do our 20 minutes, come in, and like there's barely enough time to like eat a sandwich and then it's over. Like I thought it was a little bit. The schedule changed under Rizzi. The practices got longer, and it looked like they were doing more with Rizzi out there. They started. It sounds so dumb to say, but like they started having like a stretching period when Rizzi was out there, and then the injuries went down. Like go figure. But it was like they weren't even like stretching really. Like there was a lot of weird little things that I think were happening before. And I I would be interested to see if you put Rizzy out there, if how he would change everything. There's only so much you can do really to kind of like change the structure when you're dropped in and there's like 7 weeks left. But he identified a couple key problems, and I thought they changed for the better, and the team looked more prepared and ready to go and all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, I would say those first couple of years under DA, I would agree that it didn't seem like they were practicing hard enough. Can't tackle. Like, there's a lot of stuff, and part of that's league rules. You're only allowed to have X amount of padded practices and all this stuff. But yeah, I would definitely say, just even just looking at his schedule and the amount of time, like Rizzy was having longer practices, like, and I thought that helped, and it looked like they were playing a little bit better at the end of the season despite the injuries.
I mean, I keep going back to, I think it was the last game of the 23 season when they played the Bucks. I think it was on the road. There was something about how they went in pads the whole week or something like that. Really were a lot more physical, and they came out and tattooed the Bucks, who were going into the playoffs, who won a playoff game. I mean, they dominated them. I think that was the last game of the season.
Yeah,
you may remember better than I do, but it just seemed like, wow, they found something, and then they came back the next year and seemed to play the same way. So that was just frustrating to me. What did Dennis Allen lack that Sean Payton had?
Command of the room, like definitely command of the room, an accountability culture, being able to level that stuff out and that people kind of respect it. And I would hope that is informative to their process this time, because you might hire somebody that doesn't have every single box checked. Like, there's a very few people that probably check every single box, but I think the most telling thing about the whole DA era, if you remember the end of last year, was it the Falcons? They played the Falcons last week? Yeah, because they had the kneel down or whatever. And then the game after that, or the day after that, Mickey has to come into the locker room and talk about their culture and having, we have to have buy-in and we got to learn from this and our culture has to change. And if your GM has to come in there and give that message, that kind of tells me that you don't have like the policeman on your staff to kind of carry that out through the whole entire year, that your head coach is kind of incapable of doing that. And that can be fine. Like, I don't think Ben Johnson's probably going in anywhere and hammering heads or whatever. Like, that's just not his personality. But if that's the case, then you need to have like a Dan Campbell type on the staff that can kind of do that. And I just think whoever they're hiring, they need to identify those soft spots in the interview process and ask them, okay, what are you going to do here? And how can we help you fill out your staff to make sure you have everything that you have? Sean's one of those guys that I think checks every single box. And, Sean's one of them guys that can have a bad plan and everybody knows it's a bad plan, but he believes in it so much that they just get behind it and you can make it work because, like, Sean just believes in it so much. But DA definitely was not that type of figure, and that was plainly evident. And, I think the favoritism that he played at times, being willing to throw Chris Olave under the bus or Cam Jordan under the bus or A.T. Perry or Kendre Miller, but like Derek Carr can throw the worst interception in the world and he's up there defending him and saying we're being unfair to him. Like, players notice that stuff, and that's the stuff, someone like me starts to hear a lot about. And that's when, that Parcells quote about players going off on their own and bitching. Well, they're bitching to me. Like, so that you start hearing that and players notice that stuff. And that wasn't the case with Sean. Like, I think everyone felt like things were laid out the same. And if you messed up, everybody messed up, and the grading scale was the same. But I think there was a little bit of like favoritism at times here that backfired on him big time.
Yeah.
Well, what if one more question, Rodrik? Yep, what if a Drew Brees-like player was around for DA? I mean, does it still end the same way? I mean, does the fact that he didn't set the culture correctly come back to haunt him, or was it more that Sean had the guy and Allen didn't have the guy?
Well, I think Sean was a good coach who had the guy, which made him like super next level when he was able to put the right defensive staff around himself. I think there's a lot of bad coaches. Well, bad's a strong word, but I think there's a lot of mediocre coaches in the league who get elevated by having the right quarterback, and you can hang around for a long time. If you give Zach Taylor, Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, and Derek Carr, does he have the longevity in the league? Like, I think it's tough. If you give DA Joe Burrow, does he win 10 games enough times to keep his job? Probably so. Like, they won 9 last year. If you have the guy, like, you get in the playoffs, and then maybe when you have 7 offensive starters hurt this year, people look at it and say, well, all right, like, this isn't good enough, but he made the playoffs last year, and that buys you a little bit of grace. So I think definitely if he had the quarterback, maybe the story ends a little bit differently, but I think in the end, just ultimately, he's not one of the best coaches in the league. And if you don't have one, I guess maybe sometimes it's okay to get exposed so that you have to go out and try again. But yeah, I think definitely, yeah, if you have the guy, he gets the offensive coordinator. Like, he's probably not doing Pete Carmichael the first year. He probably gets the guy he wants, which was Liam Cohen at the time. He probably says yes if the situation's undeniable, despite whatever reservations he might have had at the time with his own job situation. But yeah, I think the story could have definitely turned out differently if you got the quarterback.
Yeah, that the quarterback and head coach tandem, the comparisons, the parallel lines. I mean, it's Sean Payton is a really good when he's going to win. You see it now in Denver. He's going to win no matter who the quarterback is. When the quarterback's right, again, he just becomes a perennial power. Again, you think about there's probably only a few head coaches that are like that. You see it with Sean McVay out in LA. Again, just continues to kind of exceed expectations and is going to have the chance. Again, what Sean Payton did in Denver this year, I think, surprised everybody with the rookie, rookie quarterback. And again, even though they got trounced in the playoffs, nobody expected him to be there. So that
he almost got Taysom Hill. He almost made Taysom Hill believable. And I mean, I don't know if you guys ever watched the BYU tape, but like it got closer than it ever should have been able. If you watch the BYU tape, like it was, if he hadn't played that last game against Philly the year where he had that little window of start and he played, I can't remember who it was. It was Atlanta, someone else, and then Atlanta again. If it had just stopped there, like we all would have went into that offseason thinking like, oh my God, like this guy could maybe be a viable starter. And he got exposed against Philly and it kind of fell apart. But like it became reasonably close, and that guy had no business like actually almost getting there. So yeah, he is unbelievable.
I remember watching the Taysom Hill preseason quarterback tape when he was with the Green Bay Packers. What Sean Payton did with Taysom Hill, again, it's just another feather in the cap to what the genius is. Again, going back to my Atlanta days, always overachieved with his offensive line. It was always some is better than any individual player. You look at the wideout group, you look at almost any position other than that quarterback spot. Drew Brees played at his Hall of Fame level. Everybody else probably played at least a level higher. Again, that's a special head coach. Is there a head coach in this cycle that's like that? I don't know if I see anybody like that. Again, the jury's still out on guys like Aaron Glenn, like Ben Johnson. We've seen the story on Mike McCarthy. He's going to compete. He's going to have some good offenses. He can make a decent soup out of some scraps that are in the fridge. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a roster that tough decisions are going to have to be made. There's a lot of ugly cap numbers where even if you do something with them to get younger, you're not having a ton of savings. The draft is going to be, who are you going to get in the draft there? Again, is it Will Campbell? Good luck. Do you go, draft, just best player available, forget about need. You've got a bunch of needs on this team. Go draft the best available player. So it's going to be a fun offseason for you. And what are you most looking for? Again, from now until draft time, until training camp starts, again, forget the head coach. The head coach will take care of itself. What's maybe one thing you're really looking at with this Saints team that's going to kind of give you an indication of what direction they're going to end up?
Absolutely, what they do with the cap. I mean, it's going to be telling to what their path is, and big circle around Derek Carr. Again, I don't expect him to go, but he could. But do they hang on to everybody? If they hang on to all these old guys, it tells you like it's just they're going to squeeze every last bit of life out of this. No matter if it costs you Zach Bond or wins or your future or whatever it is, like they're just going to hang on to them and. That's 100%. That's my main storyline of the offseason, because I really think the approach to that like dictates how much success the coach is going to have too, and if he has a shot at getting to year 5, or if it's going to be a couple of years and done. I think they are long overdue. Maybe not for a total reset, but definitely some type of reset. And it starts with there's a handful of older guys that, while they can still play, like I think it's probably better for this team to get out before, it's quit before the players' skill set quits on them.
Yeah. Well, Nick, this has been excellent. Again, if you're a fan of the Saints, or if you just like, paying attention to the NFC South, or just front office in general, this hopefully this was good. Nick, your website, your X handle, where can people find more about you, follow you, get all that information?
Yeah, website is neworleans.football, and I'm on Twitter at Nick_Underhill.
Nice and
if
easy.
You're serious about the Saints, and if you listen to this, if you're still listening, you probably are. Don't walk, run to subscribe with Nick's site. It's the only one that you really are going to get insightful information. The amount of content is unbelievable, more than I can handle. And Nick's insights are great. We didn't get to talk about this, but Nick is more knowledgeable about the schemes and the way players block, the way the defense. He knows the quarters coverage from from other things. You'll get all that for $89 a month. I think it's just
$89 a year. $89 a year. Yeah.
Sorry. Big
Man, that must be some really good content for $89 a month.
Yeah, I mean, we can start trying. If that's what you want to pay, I can change yours.
I'm probably still paying. No, I'm still paying, man. I am a paying member of this, and it's worth every penny. So anyway,
awesome, Nick. Well, thanks for being on.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Well, that does it for us this week on Scouting the League. Scouts, just a reminder, I am working on a scouting community. All the resources you need that everyone else seems to have to make sure you are finding success in every area of your football life. Need some information on scouting salaries across the league? We got you. Want someone to review your contract? Talk to me. We can get you hooked up. Thinking about financial planning, tax implications, planning for the future, we've got you there as well. Or if it's a piece of mentorship, job growth, development, so many more things we plan. We will be a scouting community together. Hit me a text, give me a call, send me a DM on X at RightStepADV. This will remain and stay completely anonymous, but stay completely plugged in as well. We will work together for the good of the industry altogether. If you are an agent, before we go, make sure you go check out Agent Live 360. It is at agentlive360.com for everything you need for your agency, from players to coaches, managing profiles, tracking invoices, sending invoices, getting paid, keeping up on every element of your entire agency. Notification emails, file, folder, storage, ROI, transactions, invoices, calendar, contracts, teams, reps, everything all in one spot for you. That is Agent Live 360. Hop on, request a demo. Yours truly will hop on, walk you through it. I can promise you we will talk some football as well. Sign up now with code TRIAL90 for a 90-day, 3-month trial at just $10 a month for Agent Live 360. That's at agentlive360.com. Go check it out now. By the time we talk next week, we will surely have more clarity from at least a few of these places where jobs are outstanding. But in the meantime, I implore you, ignore the mock trade engines out there. Calm down on how fast you think teams should be moving. Dive into a good book on anything football, whether it is one of Neil's 2 books he's got out there, or my personal favorite, The Score Takes Care of Itself, where Bill Walsh takes you through that San Francisco 49ers organization. Educating yourself and pumping the brakes will go a long way in your football life. More recommendations, let us know at Inside the League or at RightStepADV. Keep enjoying football. Keep scouting.